"You'll never own me," the last Apache woman said when the cowboy bought her at the market. The noon sun scalded Dry Hollow until even the church bell sagged in the heat. Dust hung like smoke above the square where men gathered, squinting, grinning, thirsty for one last show. On the wooden platform stood a young Apache woman barefoot, wrists bound, her shadow sharp against the boards. They called her the last one left, as if she were livestock at season's end. "She's not worth feed," someone jeered. "Sell her for the rope she's tied with." Laughter rolled through the heat, harsh, dry, cruel. The traitor, Eldon Graves, wiped sweat from his neck. "Last chance. Boys, no one wants the wild one." The girl's gaze swept the crowd, not pleading, accusing, even beaten. She stood straighter than the men below. The silence that followed was uglier than their laughter. Then a voice cut through it. $2. Heads turned. At the edge of the crowd stood Owen Lark, coat dusted with ash, eyes shadowed beneath his hat. Graves smirked. "You buying trouble?" Owen laid 2 coins on the table. No, just buying her a different ending as he cut the ropes. The girl met his eyes and said, low but clear, "You'll never own me." He paused, blade still in hand. "Good," he murmured. "I never wanted to." Before we continue, tell us where you're listening from. Maybe you're tuning in from Texas. Maybe from somewhere halfway across the world. Wherever you are, let us know in the comments. It's good to remember how far a single story can ride. Heat clung to Dry Hollow, the way smoke clings to a shirt stubborn and inescapable. The town was a handful of sagging porches and sun-buckled signs around a square where dust moved like slow water. A saloon leaned into a hardware shack. A livery leaned into nothing at all. Men stood in doorways not to welcome, but to measure what passed: horses, news, strangers. That's how they measured mercy, by weight and profit. Owen Lark walked the Apache girl from the platform to the edge of town without ceremony. No one followed. A few men laughed into their glasses. One spat at his boots and called it change he'd never see again. Owen didn't look back. The girl didn't either. Her wrists were free now, the skin raw where rope had argued with bone. She kept her chin level, as if a straight neck were the only thing the crowd had not priced. His forge sat apart, a squat room of stone and soot with a lean-to stable, dark as a cistern. Inside, the anvil waited like a patient animal. Owen set a cup on the bench, filled it from a skin, slid a folded blanket toward the threshold. He did not touch her, did not ask her name. The habit of the place was silence, and he wore it like an apron. He was a cowboy by hunger and a blacksmith by blood. His father taught him to read metal by the color of its heat, to hear a cracked shoe the way a doctor hears a weak heart. War taught him other readings, numbers on chain links, pay ledgers, the way smoke tastes when it rises from something living. A pale welt bent along the right side of his neck, a crescent of old flame. Dry Hollow called it a warning. He called it a reminder. She took the cup, watched the firebox, with a gaze that did not flinch at sparks. 20, perhaps, but the set of her shoulders belonged to older weather. She wore a small silver disc at her throat, cut with a sun symbol rubbed thin by thumb and time. The way she guarded that circle told him more than any history would. Outside, afternoon darkened toward copper. A child ran by. A woman shook a rug. Somewhere a piano tried to climb out of tune and fell back hard. Owen raked coals until they brightened, then set a shoe to heat. The iron colored up through blood. Cherry, orange. He worked without show, simple blows, clean pauses, the rhythm of someone who had learned that strength was knowing when to lift the hammer, not only when to drop it. Sit near the wall, he said finally, not looking up. Night turns colder than it promises. She did not move farther in. Walls remember, she said. He nodded. So does wind. The shoe rang true against the anvil, in that music. Town's laughter faded to rumor, and the room decided what kind of ending it would allow. Morning broke brittle and white over Dry Hollow, the kind of light that made dust look like frost. From his forge, Owen Lark could hear the town already awake, buckets clanging, men shouting over the price of hay. Somewhere down the street, someone mentioned his name, followed by laughter. He kept his hammer steady. Let them talk. The fire didn't care who it burned for. The Apache girl hadn't left. She sat outside the door, sharpening a sliver of scrap metal with a flat stone. Her hair was black against the ash-gray wall, her eyes fixed not on the blade, but on him through the open doorway. "You can use my knife," he said, not pausing his work. "I don't borrow things I can't return." She answered. Her voice was low, without bitterness. He quenched the shoe in a trough, steam rising like ghosts. "You planning to stay long?" "I plan nothing," she said. "Plans make slaves of fools." He half smiled at that, small, tired, like a man remembering something half good. "Then what do I call you? Names don't change what I am." "Still," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "they help when you shout for someone in a fire." She looked at him then, the faintest crease between her brows. Naira. The sound of it settled into the room like dust finding a surface. By noon, the town had found new gossip. At the saloon, Eldon Graves leaned against the counter, drink sweating in his hand. That blacksmith's bought himself a ghost. He told anyone listening. "Let's see if he wakes up with his throat opened." The men laughed, not cruelly, but lazily, as though cruelty were simply the day's entertainment. Owen heard about it before sundown. Hetty Vale, the innkeeper, brought him grain for the mare and muttered, "You keep your door barred. They don't take kindly to what they don't understand." He nodded, thanked her, and went back to the forge. The glow from inside drew a small crowd of moths and one wary soul who hadn't yet decided to leave. Naira stepped closer to the heat, arms folded. "They hate me because they're afraid. They hate me because I remind them," Owen said. "Of what?" "That there's always someone left to hate." For a moment, the only sound was the soft sigh of air through the bellows. He set another shoe to the anvil, its edge catching the light. She watched the iron blush and darken, fascinated. "You work like you're praying," she said. He glanced at her. "Maybe I am." "To what?" He hesitated. "Whatever still listens." That night, wind moved through the valley like a memory too stubborn to fade. Owen sat by the dying fire, cleaning his tools. When he heard her voice from outside, "You could have walked away today," she said. "Let them think you'd thrown me out." "I could have," he agreed. "Why didn't you?" He stared into the coals. "Because if I did, I'd be no different from them." She was silent for a long while. Then, barely above the wind, "Don't expect gratitude. Didn't buy that either." Her shadow shifted against the doorframe, half in moonlight, half in dark. For the first time, she looked almost uncertain not of him, but of the place between them. When she spoke again, her tone had softened, almost curious. "You've got a scar on your neck. Fire." He nodded once. "Then you already know," she said. "Some things burn and never stop." He met her gaze through the smoke curling from the coals. Maybe that's how we remember where not to stand. Neither spoke again. The forge settled into its slow heartbeat of cooling metal. And outside, Dry Hollow slept uneasy, dreaming of chains and the fools who dared break them. Days thinned into weeks beneath the same white sky. In Dry Hollow, gossip ripened like spoiled fruit passed hand to hand until no one remembered the seed of it. Folks said the blacksmith had gone soft, keeping an Apache girl in his yard. Others swore she'd bewitched him. Owen Lark heard every version before it died in the wind. He answered each one with another strike of his hammer. Naira stayed. She swept the forge without being asked, fed the mare, and learned the rhythm of iron on anvil as though it were language. Sometimes she hummed under her breath, a sound that didn't quite belong to any tune he knew. Low, steady, older than the valley. When he asked about it, she said, "It keeps the ghosts busy." He didn't press further. One afternoon, two men from the saloon, Marlowe Fitch and Jed Kearney, stumbled up the hill smelling of whiskey and pride. "Let's see the blacksmith's prize," one said. Banging on the door, Owen stepped out, sleeves rolled, face calm. "You've seen her," he said. "Now leave." They grinned, circling. Maybe she'd rather come with someone who knows what to do with her. Before the second man finished laughing, Owen hit him once clean, hard, enough to send him to the dirt. The other lunged and caught a backhand of sparks when Owen shoved the hot end of a poker into the dust between them. The men spat curses and stumbled back toward town, muttering about iron-handed fools. When it was quiet again, he turned to find Naira at the doorway. "You shouldn't fight them," she said. "They came looking for one." "Still," she murmured, "they'll come again. Then we'll be ready." She studied him a moment longer. "You could have killed them. I've done enough killing." Something unreadable passed across her face. Respect. Maybe. Or recognition of a wound too deep to poke at. That night, when the fire dimmed, she brought him a small bowl of salve that smelled of pine and bitter root. "For your knuckles," she said. He looked at the ointment, then at her. "You made this, my father did. I just remember how." He dipped 2 fingers in, rubbed it into the split skin. "It works. It always does," she said. The next days folded into a pattern neither spoke of. She gathered herbs in the ravine at dawn. He shod horses and repaired hinges till the light failed. They ate in silence, and silence became their comfort. He began to notice small things, the way her braid loosened when the wind turned hot, how she touched the silver disc at her throat when thinking. Once, he caught her tracing its sun-shaped grooves with her thumb. "Your father made that?" he asked. "Yes." "Still means something." She met his eyes. "It means I remember." Owen nodded, going back to his work. But the words lingered like coal glow. "It means I remember." He wondered what she saw when she looked at the forge, the fire that freed her or the fire that once destroyed her world. One evening, rain threatened but never came. Thunder muttered behind the mountains. The sky hung heavy, copper-colored. Owen was repairing a wagon wheel when he realized she'd been gone since morning. Worry, unfamiliar and sharp, struck him. He found her near the ridge, kneeling beside a small mound of stones new, not weathered. "What is it?" he asked. "A grave," she said simply. "Someone who never had one." He stood beside her, hat in hand. "Yours to mark, mine to remember," she replied. The wind rose, scattering dust over the stones without thinking. He reached out and steadied her shoulder until the gust passed. She didn't pull away. When they returned, the forge was cool, but neither lit it. They sat outside instead, watching lightning crawl along the far hills. "Back home," she said quietly. "We believe the first storm after fire carried away the pain of what burned. Does it work?" She smiled faintly. "Sometimes." He wanted to tell her that her presence had already changed the way his world sounded, the hammer, the wind, even the silence, but he didn't. He only said, "If it rains, I'll leave the door open." For the first time since she arrived, she looked directly at him and nodded. That night, rain came hard and certain. The forge hissed as drops struck the still warm metal. Through the doorway, Owen saw her standing inside, barefoot on the packed earth, hand raised toward the roof as if greeting the storm. Water ran down her arms like silver threads. He caught himself staring, then turned back to the fire, pretending to busy himself with the bellows. From behind him, she said softly, "You should sleep. The storm will keep watch." He smiled into the glow. "Then maybe we'll both rest easy for once, outside." Thunder rolled over the valley, and for a fleeting moment, Dry Hollow smelled like it might remember mercy. The rain didn't last. By morning, the desert had swallowed every drop, leaving the air heavy with the scent of ash and iron. The forge smoked fitfully as Owen raked the coals back to life. Naira crouched nearby, wringing out a strip of cloth that once had been white. "They'll come," she said quietly. "Men like Graves don't lose money without getting it back." Owen nodded, jaw tight. "Then they'll come to ash. That's all that's left of my patience." He thought she might smile at that, but she didn't. Her eyes moved to the mountains the way someone watches an old wound for infection. By noon, the sky turned the color of brass. A single rider appeared at the far end of the street, dust trailing behind him like a comet's tail. When he stopped at the saloon, the porch creaked under the weight of his silence. Rufus Kellen, the man, Graves sent when he wanted something found and hurt. His coat was long, his eyes small and pale, the color of old milk. Within the hour, 4 other men joined him. They rode out toward the hills, toward the blacksmith's forge that Dry Hollow had already decided was cursed. Hetty Vale saw them pass and hurried to the shop. "Owen," she whispered, "you've got maybe an hour before they're on you." Graves hired Kellen's pack. "They'll kill you both and sell her bones for proof." He thanked her. Nothing more. When she left, he doused the forge, packed a small satchel of tools, rope and water. He turned to Naira. "We leave now." She didn't ask where. She just said, "I'll ride the mare. You take the gray." They moved fast, cutting across the flats where mesquite clawed at the wind. Behind them, Dry Hollow shrank into a smear of dust. By sunset, the land turned wild stone ridges, gullies that vanished into shadow. It was there, between one heartbeat and the next, that Naira smelled smoke again. "Behind us," she said. "They're burning the trail." Owen turned, saw the faint orange flicker cresting a ridge. "They're driving us east," he muttered, eyes narrowing, "toward the canyon. Then we go north," she said. "There's shelter at Redwater Pass." He hesitated. "It's a bad road. Bad roads are the only kind left," she replied, already turning her horse. By dusk, the pass rose before them, walls of red stone closing like a throat. Wind screamed through its narrow mouth, carrying dust thick as breath. They led the horses through single file, the hooves sinking in soft, rust-colored sand. Halfway through, a shot cracked. The mare reared, Naira barely clinging to the reins. Echoes exploded from wall to wall. Another shot closer. "Go," Owen barked. They spurred forward as shadows flickered along the ridge above riders, rifles, torchlight. The first bullet struck rock near Owen's head, showering him with grit. He ducked, returned fire once, more to break rhythm than to kill. They found cover behind a tumble of boulders. The horses shivered, foam at their mouths. Naira pressed a hand against her chest, catching breath. "They're circling," she said. Owen checked his rifle, half a magazine left. "They'll try to drive us out. I know how to drive wolves," she said. She notched an arrow, the feathered shaft gleaming faintly. When the first rider appeared between two torches, she fired. The man pitched sideways, silent. Another lunged forward. Owen met him with a shot that shattered his lantern, throwing darkness over half the canyon. The wind shifted, bringing a tide of sand and the smell of blood. The next few minutes were chaos hoofbeats, gunfire, the hiss of arrows. Sparks danced across the rocks where bullets struck. Then silence, deep and sudden. The storm had swallowed sound itself. Owen leaned back against the stone, breathing hard. Pain burned along his left shoulder. A bullet had grazed him. He didn't mention it. Naira crouched beside him, face streaked with dust and sweat. She saw the blood and tore a strip from her skirt. "Hold still," she said. "It's nothing." She glared. "You bled enough for nothing before." He let her press the cloth against the wound. Her hands were quick, firm, smelling faintly of sage and smoke. He felt the warmth of her fingers more than the sting. "You've done this before," he murmured. "For others," she said. "Not for men who buy what they can't keep." Her words were sharp, but her touch was careful. When she tied the knot, she didn't move away. The wind pushed her hair across his cheek. He said, softly, "You could have left me back there." "I could have," she replied, "but I don't leave things unfinished." They waited until the canyon quieted. Two of Kellen's men lay in the sand. The rest had scattered when the storm hit. Lightning crawled over the ridges, painting the world white for a breath, then black again. Owen loaded the horses. "We move before dawn. They'll regroup." Naira nodded but didn't mount. She was watching the ridge, her face unreadable. "What is it?" he asked. "Graves isn't done," she said. "He won't stop until one of us is ash." Owen looked at her, really looked, the grit on her skin, the streak of blood along her arm, the defiant tilt of her chin. "Then he'll find nothing but fire waiting." She met his gaze, eyes bright even in the dark. "Fire doesn't save," she said. "It only burns what's weak. Then let's see which of us it spares." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then she smiled small, fierce. "You talk like a man who finally stopped running." "Maybe I have," he said. "Maybe I found something worth staying burned for." The wind rose again, scattering sand over the bodies at their feet. Naira turned away first, pulling her hood tight. "Keep your strength," she said. "Tomorrow we'll need all of it." Owen followed, glancing once over his shoulder at the canyon, a scar in the land, glowing faintly under lightning. He thought of chains and hammers, of all the iron he'd ever shaped, and how none of it could bind what now walked beside him. They rode north beneath a bruised sky, leaving behind the smell of rain and gunpowder. Far ahead, Ash Mesa waited black silhouettes against the thunderclouds. The storm swallowed their trail, and the desert closed over their names like a secret it had decided to keep. They reached Ash Mesa before dawn, where the ground rose in broken spines of black stone. The storm had passed, leaving only the hiss of wind through jagged crevices. They found a shallow cave near the ridge, a hollow carved by centuries of rain that had long forgotten mercy. Owen gathered twigs and struck a spark. The flame caught quick, blue at first, then orange, painting the walls with restless light. Naira crouched by the entrance, her bow still within reach, eyes tracking every shadow. Neither spoke until the horses settled. You should sleep, he said. I don't sleep when the earth's still moving, she murmured. He followed her gaze. Tiny pebbles rolled down the slope, loosened by wind. Mesa's old, he said. It just remembers falling. She glanced back at him. So do people. He didn't argue. The truth of it hung between them, sharp as smoke. When morning came, Owen's wound had stiffened. He tried to lift the saddle and nearly dropped it. Naira stepped forward without a word and took the weight from his hands. You're stubborn, she said. I've been called worse. She smiled, barely. I believe that. He sat on a rock, watching her work tightening straps, cleaning the horse's hooves with efficient movements. The desert light caught in her hair, for the first time since they met. He realized how young she truly was. Not a child, but a woman who had carried too much of the world too soon. When she was done, she sat beside him. You said once you forged chains, she said quietly. For my people, I did, he answered. Didn't think about who wore them. Just thought about coin. She was silent a moment. You think saving me erases that? No. He rubbed his hands together, the scars pale against soot. But maybe every good strike evens one bad one. Her gaze softened, though her voice stayed steady. You don't have to pay for what others did. Maybe, he said. But I do have to live with what I did. Naira leaned forward, stirring the fire with a stick. My father used to say, forgiveness isn't a gift, it's work. He looked at her, surprised. Does it ever end? When the hands that ask and the hands that give start to look the same, the flames bent in the wind, and for a while, neither moved. Later that afternoon, Owen used a fallen branch as a lever, shaping it into a crude walking staff. His shoulder ached with every breath, but he refused to rest. Naira watched him, then rose and touched his arm lightly. You can't build a path bleeding on it, she said. I've built worse things. Not this time. She pressed her palm against the bandage, firm but gentle. Let it heal. He studied her hand on his skin, the warmth of it cutting through the ache. Why do you care? He asked, though the question came out softer than he meant. Because we're not finished yet, she said, and because the desert buries names faster than it buries bodies. He met her eyes, the silence between them heavy and strange. Then we keep each other above ground, he said. She didn't answer, but her hand stayed where it was, a heartbeat longer than needed. As night fell, the horizon glowed red embers of the storm dying behind the mountains. From somewhere far below came the faint cry of a coyote, lonely but alive. Naira added a final piece of wood to the fire. Tomorrow, she said. We reach Silver Creek. It's quiet there. Owen nodded. Quiet sounds good. She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. It's where the land forgets to be cruel, she said. Maybe we can learn the same. The firelight flickered between them, two figures carved out of dust and regret, waiting for the dawn to decide if they still belonged to the desert or to each other. By the time they left Ash Mesa, the sun had shed its gentleness. The air burned white, the kind of heat that stripped even thoughts to bone. For 2 days, they rode without seeing a soul, the land rolling out in endless ochre and silence. Somewhere ahead lay Silver Creek Basin, though the creek itself was more rumor than river, a vein of water that appeared only when the earth pitied the living. Owen rode with his arm bound tight, the wound throbbing but cleaner. Naira led most of the way, reading the land like a book she'd already memorized. When she slowed to study hoofprints or feel the soil, he found himself watching her more than the trail. He wondered how a person could carry so much weight and still move like wind. Near dusk, On the third day, the valley opened low willows, cracked boulders, a thread of brown water curling between reeds. The sound of it was soft and unbelievable. "This is it?" Owen asked. "It will be," she said. Dismounting, she crouched beside the creek, let the water run through her fingers, then smiled faintly, still alive. He knelt, drank from his hands, and for the first time in months, the taste wasn't dust or ash. They built their camp near a fallen cottonwood. Owen unpacked his tools, found a patch of stone flat enough to hold an anvil. By nightfall, the forge flickered again, small, hesitant, but alive. The rhythm of his hammer filled the basin, echoing off the rocks like a heartbeat, returning to a body thought dead. Naira tended a circle of herbs around the camp, setting roots in soil that had forgotten green. When she came to stand by him, the fire painted gold across her cheekbones. "You brought fire back to a dead place," she said. He shook his head. "You did. I just borrowed it." She looked at the glowing metal, then at him. "And what are you making something better than chains?" he said. "Maybe hinges for a door. Maybe a bell." "A bell," she echoed. "For when we're safe." Her eyes softened, though her smile was thin. "You think the desert will ever be safe?" "Not for everyone," he said, "but maybe for two." Days fell into a new kind of rhythm. Morning, Owen at the forge, Naira gathering herbs. Noon, the two of them mending the corral they built from fallen wood. Night silence, broken by the sound of the creek whispering under stars. Once, while patching the roof of the lean-to, Naira asked, "If you hadn't seen me that day, what would you be doing now?" He paused mid-swing, probably letting something else burn. She nodded slowly. "Then I'm glad you looked up." He met her eyes and said, "So am I." A week later, Owen finished what he'd been shaping, a small iron bell. Plain but clean. The clapper made from a melted horseshoe nail. He hung it on the porch beam, struck it once. The sound drifted through the air low, pure, unbroken. Naira stood beside him, holding 2 tarnished coins. "Do you remember these?" He smiled. $2 I threw away. You bought a mistake," she said softly. "I bought mercy, got freedom instead." She set the coins on the anvil. "Then I'm paying you back." He shook his head. "You can't buy what was never for sale." Her gaze met his, steady, bright, the way it had been that first day on the platform. Only now, it carried warmth where there had been defiance. "Then keep them," she said, "to remember the cost." He closed her fingers around the coins instead, to remember what it changed. Their hands stayed joined longer than the gesture required. Neither spoke. The fire inside the forge snapped once, as if approving. When the first rain came to Silver Creek Basin, it didn't fall so much as settle slow drops, melting the dust into scent. The fire hissed, then steadied. Naira lifted her face to the sky. "My father said." She whispered, "The sun only hides when it's tired. It never dies." Owen watched her, raindrops sliding down the curve of her neck, catching in her hair. "Then we'll keep it company till it wakes." She smiled, small and true. "That sounds like work." "I'm good with work," he said. The rain grew heavier, a soft drumming that filled the valley. Owen set aside his tools and stepped beneath the overhang. For the first time since Dry Hollow, he wasn't running, wasn't hiding, just standing beside someone who had stopped fearing fire. Naira reached into her satchel, pulled out the silver disc from her neck, and placed it on the anvil. "This," she said, "was my father's fire. It should stay where flame lives." He shook his head gently. "It lives where you do." She hesitated, then slipped the chain back on. Thunder rolled over the mountains, echoing like a forge being struck by the sky. That evening, as dusk bled across the desert, Owen sat by the doorway of the forge, shaping a final piece of metal, a simple horseshoe. Naira watched him from the steps, braiding her hair. "When people see scars," she said, "they think of pain." He didn't look up. "Scars mean it lived." She smiled. "Then so do we." He finished the shoe, set it to cool, and turned to her. The bell above them swayed slightly, catching the wind. Its tone was soft, steady, alive. They stood together in the quiet, watching the horizon fade to silver. The land, once cruel, now hummed with small sounds of peace, the dripping roof, the creek's murmur, a single lark calling from the cottonwood. Owen reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You know," he said, "I used to think the fire took everything, and now," he looked toward the forge, then back at her, "now I think it gives back what you're brave enough to hold." Naira's eyes lifted toward the darkening sky. "Then we keep holding," she said. He nodded, voice rough but sure. "We keep holding." The wind carried the sound of the bell across the basin, mingling with the rustle of rain and the faint call of the bird whose name he bore. The desert, for once, did not echo loss, it echoed promise.